Good afternoon and welcome to the Fitchburg Historical Commission. This is the September 29th, 2022 monthly meeting. And I'd like to now call our meeting to order. We have, I believe, 5 members present, so we do have a quorum. We have Donna Ostrowski, Andy Lepasti, Ellen DiGeronimo, and I believe Sam Blair has just signed in also by phone. Is that you, Sam?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, terrific.
Hi, Sam.
Hi, Ellen.
Nice to hear you.
Yeah, long time no hear.
I know.
And I believe that Megan has notified us that she can't be at the meeting today. So I think we are ready to roll. So thank you all for being here. I'd like to let everyone know, please be advised that FATV is conducting an audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast in the future. And let's see. We have the number of members here. I think we will move to the agenda, and let me see if I can share my screen. And does everybody see the agenda on your screens at this moment?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Okay, so this is the agenda for today's meeting. As we had run out of time on during our August meeting, we lost members and we had to adjourn. We did have a public comment that we weren't able to read for the August meeting. I'd like to read that into our record of today's meeting. So hang on a second here, see if I can pull that up. Okay, can you see this public comment for 8:25 meeting?
Yes.
On your... Okay.
Can see it here.
This was sent. This was sent to me on August 23rd, a couple of days before our meeting last month, and it was from Jacqueline Vijay, a Fitchburg resident. And hello, commissioners. I'd like to read it for record, and we will attach this to today's minutes. Says, hello, commissioners. Below is a public comment for your 8:25 meeting on agenda item number 4. Please read it into the record. Thank you. Item number 4 was in last month with our review of the draft demolition delay ordinance. And going on to read, the ordinance is overly broad and should be limited to buildings in the historic district, which you are in charge of. My home is over 50 years old and there's nothing historic about it. I don't see a lot of new housing in the city, and I think most people's homes would fall under this ordinance, and it would be an added cost / time to administer this. This would slow down efforts to demolish blighted buildings. I don't plan to demolish my house, but if I had a fire or something, I doubt my homeowner's insurance company would want to pay an extra year's rent for me to live in temporary quarters while someone sits and mulls over whether it's historic or not. This ordinance should be dropped permanently from consideration. And it's signed by Jacqueline Vijay, Fitchburg resident. So thank you for the public comment, Jacqueline, and we will we'll include this as part of today's public comment and include it in our record. I think we will have a little time to be talking about this it's on our agenda again this time, and I believe we note your concerns, and I think there are already some built-in pieces in some of the draft ordinance that for speedy processing of things such as fire, we'll be able to take your comments. We appreciate those. Okay. Let me go back to, let's see if I can now share my minutes again here. Or the agenda. So the agenda item, is the agenda back on the screen for everyone?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Second item for, I don't believe there's any other additional public comment. Second agenda item is to review and approve minutes, past unposted minutes from April 2018, May 2018, all of the 12 months meeting notices or minutes for 2021, which is 14 back minutes. This will, I've sent out these draft minutes for our commission members to review. I know that Don has emailed us all with some comments that he has for some corrections. And has everybody seen those from Don?
Yeah, yes. Mhm.
Okay, thank you, Don. And any other additions, corrections that anyone has for these past 14 meeting minutes, 2 in 2018, 12 meetings or meeting notices of 2021. Any other comments or corrections?
No, just thank you to Dawn. You did a great job of editing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve these 14 past meeting minutes?
I move that we approve the past 14 minutes.
I second.
Okay, so Ellen, and who seconded it?
Sam did.
Okay, Sam. 2. All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye, raise your hand if you're on screen. Abstain?
I'll be abstaining since I wasn't here for those meetings.
Okay,
That's a good idea.
that's very good. And any nays? Okay, the minutes have approved as amended. And we will post those very quickly, hopefully within the next day or so after this meeting on the city's website, and we'll also send that to the other appropriate parties. So thank you very much. Item number 3, review and approve minutes for the August 25, 2022 meeting. I believe everybody received copies of those.
Yes, thank you.
Anybody want to see those again? Megan has submitted those.
I move that we approve the minutes of the August 25th, 2022 meeting.
Okay. Anybody second the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, that's Andy.
Yes.
Okay. And all in favor of approving, please say aye. Raise your
Aye.
hand.
Aye.
Okay. Any abstentions? Any nays? Okay, the motion is approved. Okay, moving on to nomination and election of for the secretary position for the commission. We have request from our current co-secretaries, Megan and Ellen would like to step down for kind of an overburden of work for kind of all of you guys. And I would like to nominate Andrew Lepasti for this position.
Second.
All right. And any other nominations for the secretary position? Hearing none, I would like to go to a vote for appointing Mr. Lepasti as the secretary of the Historical Commission, kind of moving forward for kind of the, let's say, for the finishing of this term, which ends in December. Hopefully you'll like it so much you would like to continue on for another year term. And so do I call for a vote? All in favor of
Aye.
electing Andrew the secretary
Aye.
position? Aye. Sarah,
Aye.
Don,
Aye.
Andy. I believe that's unanimous. Thank you very much, Andy. We appreciate it. Your duties will be starting for our October meeting, so you have a vacation of roughly 30 days here. So thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Congratulations. You get the big gold star today. So. Item number 5, update on the proposed demolition delay ordinance study. And I believe I had said at the last meeting or one of the last meetings that I had a kind of a chart of other cities and towns that have demolition delay ordinances, including some of the gateway cities, in kind of a comparison, and also was starting to make a list of our counselors and perhaps the wards that might correspond with some of your own residences also. I'm sorry to say that I haven't completed that yet. I've had some other things I've been working on. And maybe with maybe the comments that we had, public comments from earlier, I'd like to maybe, well, any other comments on the demolition delay ordinance at this point that others would like to discuss?
No, I would suggest that we table it. I know that it's a lot of work to put this together, Keith, and we'll give you time to do it.
Okay, any other comments?
Well, I would just like to address the public comment, which is a legitimate concern. And it's also a concern that we have, that people who have structures that are not of historic value not be delayed in demolishing them. And that has to go through the city anyway, and it takes time for that to happen. So that it doesn't affect, and I have a basis for saying that in terms of the other communities that have demolition delay ordinances in Massachusetts. They don't have any problem with demolishing buildings that are not of historic value. There's no delay, they get demolished as soon as they would otherwise. So it's really a non-issue based on the 135 other communities in Massachusetts that have demolition delay ordinances. What we're aiming at is buildings that are of historic value. Last meeting, we saw a picture of the old Wallace Library, and I couldn't help wondering, why was it demolished? It's a stunning building, and there was not really an answer to that. Something about bringing it up to date, or wait a minute, what is demolishing a building of historic value, a stunning building of historic value? How does that bring it up to date? How does that help the economy of Fitchburg?
I think I can add something to that, Don. I don't know if you all know, but Rodney Wallace, you know, he had the first library built, and I don't know if George was his grandson or great grandson. I'm not sure, but anyway, Mr. George Wallace was very, very interested in modern design, and he proposed that he would build a new museum, a new library, excuse me, in a modern design. And his offer was accepted. And I don't know if there was a lot of controversy, to tell you the truth. And so he built the new library and gave it to the city, and he added the children's library, which was the first in the nation, and that was dedicated to his wife, Alice. And the other modern structure that was built around the same time was his personal home, which in a neighborhood that had many historic homes, and there wasn't any objection to that. But it was a gift of George Wallace.
Well, that's all well and good.
Or from
but
George Wallace.
I would just like to have seen a discussion of because yes, in the 1960s, there was this, and Keith can bear me out on this, there was this notion that of creating buildings that are quote unquote modern, which is all well and good. I mean, even the City Hall in Boston got awards at the time, but it's had a lot of criticism for it. Now, of course, it's a historic building because of all the criticism and controversy surrounding it. I'm thinking more in terms of the economy of Fitchburg, and every one of the master plans says, use your historic resources, in particular, the historic buildings. And we can't use the old Wallace. When I go to other, my wife, Ren, and I drive around various towns in Massachusetts, and we see an old, a library, in an old building. Don't have to go far, go to Leominster, beautiful old building that is worth just driving someplace to see. How many, not to put down Fitchburg Library and its modern design, I don't know how many people would go out of their way to see the present Fitchburg. Maybe they would, but I don't know. In any event, what I'm saying is at least there could have been a discussion instead of, well, when it asked, well, why was it demolished? And well, because they wanted to, they had a gift of a building that was designed in the 1960s. Well, is that enough reason to demolish what appears to me to have been a very stunning building that would have been an attraction for downtown Fitchburg?
Well, to offer my memory, okay, And I was 33 years old then with 7 kids and wasn't really thinking about historic preservation. I apologize for that. But I don't recall any discussion, and I'll take it upon myself to go to the library and look through some old Sentinels. But I don't remember any discussion, and I do remember that, yeah, at least I think I remember that there was, you know, lots of gratitude to Mr. Wallace, and especially the fact that he added a children's library to the newer library. But I promise you that I will check some old Sentinels. Truthfully, Don, historic preservation, I don't think was even understood at the time.
Yeah, clearly, because so many, Fitchburg has lost so many historic buildings, as we know, and it's heartbreaking.
Well, if I could, I just add, I'm not trying to monopolize, but I was on my way to pick up my son at the art museum one day, and I drove by the this beautiful house that was where the new court, the new post office is, and it was called the Low House, and it was a magnificent home. And next door to it had been the Lucy Helen Hospital, which was in its day, I guess, one of the few hospitals dedicated, to birthing. And I watched the boom hit the Low House, and I started to cry. This is the gospel truth. And I went around the corner to get Mark, and when he came out, he said, "Mom, did somebody die?" And I said, "No, Mark." I said, "But I've never thought about this before, but this beautiful house is being torn down." So I drove around so he could see it too. And the next morning I called the planning department and spoke to Frank Garrettson, who was the senior planner. And I said, "Frank, how did this happen? And what can we do to make sure that it doesn't happen again without some kind of conversation?" And that was my introduction, and deeply felt concern for historic preservation. That was its birth. So,
Yeah.
And the other thing about the hospital is a lot of Fitchburg residents were born in that hospital, and
yes, I was.
Yeah, and now they can only say, "Oh, well, that's where the hospital was." They can't say, "I was born in that building," which is, it's different. And I know when I went to an elementary school in Reading, Pennsylvania, and it was a beautiful brownstone building. And many years later, when I went back to visit my parents, I decided, well, I want to go by my elementary school, because it's just a gorgeous building, built in the 1890s, and it wasn't there. It had been demolished, and literally they put it in a parking lot. And it was you lose some of your identity, I think, when buildings of historic value in towns that you grew up in or associated with are gone. Now, maybe there's a reason for it to be gone. Maybe it was infested with termites. I don't know. But at least let's have a discussion about such buildings. And which is not to say that someone who lives in their own home, owns the home, owns the property. The experience from other towns that have demolition delay ordinances is there is no delay in that case. These are targeting specific buildings that I still, the steam plant is another case which people tell me who saw it in its heyday.
It was magnificent.
Exactly, magnificent, and it's gone forever. Why? Well, no discussion about its historic value. There was previously some discussion about maybe making it into a museum of the Industrial Revolution, which would have been fabulous. That would have been perfect for Fitchburg, which played such a prominent role in the Industrial Revolution.
That's right.
Okay.
Sorry about my phone.
All right.
No, I hear you, Dawn, and I will say that having had that experience looking at the Low House, the next morning I went to see, or I called Frank Garrettson, and he asked me what I was doing on Saturday, and I said, well, probably taking kids for haircuts, et cetera, et cetera. He said, if you've got $35, there's a one-day program at BU, and here's the number if you want to call. So I did, and I went to that meeting, and the following Monday I was in the city clerk's office asking for petitions so that I could petition that the city that the city would form an historic district study, an historic study committee. And as I was signing the petition myself, I thought, oh, it's not enough for me to do this. And I went to the Historical Society and asked the director if her board would sign it, and eventually they did, and it got approved. However, at the meeting, when the petition was before the council, we always stood up to explain our petitions. And I talked about it. I had filed it, and I felt that not unlike places like Salem and Newburyport and Boston, we had so many wonderful buildings and locations that needed to be preserved. And one of my council colleagues raised her hand and said, that's fine to be talking about Newburyport and Salem and whatever. They all have history. To which I responded, I thanked her for her comment and said, well, in addition to establishing a historic study committee, I'm going to make it my business to go to the Historical Society and find out what we can do to be sure that children, at least children in the city, are learning about the city. And it was just around that time when Doris Kirkpatrick wrote The City in the River and Around the World in Fitchburg. And that it was not immediate time, but shortly thereafter. And which is just, I mean, they're beautiful, not only beautiful books, but the contents are fabulous. And, all I can say is that as far as I can remember, before that, there really wasn't any emphasis on historic preservation.
I think I'd add there is some movement towards preserving our historic buildings. I was just thinking recently, I heard from the Historical Society, they might be doing like an app on your cell phone where you can walk up Main Street and it'll point out any of the historic buildings on Main Street. So
That would be wonderful.
I'm hoping that's going to be good for our young people to see that.
Well, we will soon have 6 historic districts, either directly on Main Street or right around the corner. So I think that the brochure that we're working on will greatly enhance what this Historical Society is planning to do.
And hopefully all the restoration work on the Fay Club will go through and make that building beautiful again and restored.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Just Andy, and for everyone's notice, there are already there are websites that you can use your mobile phone or computer to look at many sites in Fitchburg. The site is THECLIO, the Clio.
Yeah.
That's
I think I've heard that mentioned.
.com. I think it's .com or .org. I think if you just do a search with the Clio, CLIO, you will find it, and just put in Fitchburg, Mass, and you will zoom in to Fitchburg, downtown area or whatever, and you'll see a lot of points that have already been recorded. I believe Susan Navarre and the Art Museum had done some of the initial ones on that, and I think the last I looked, I think there are 20 or 30 sites now on board, some of them done by students last semester at Fitchburg State. Some of those need a couple corrections on those. And if you see any corrections needed in any of these things, you might get back to the authors on those also. But it is an interesting piece. Not everybody is aware of this. And as we get into the future items in the agenda, we'll talk a little bit more about what's happening with that. But getting back to the demolition delay discussion, which is lots of good points. History or perception of history changes, and I guess Don, you could explain this better to us than me. But I think we're in a period, and as we're looking backward, and perhaps when we were looking backward in 1950s and 60s, it was a little bit different perception of, and being aware that this is just a delay, and the time period, we're looking at 12 months at this point for where it would be eligible for the delay period, and our draft has certain conditions that would be able to avoid a delay through the building inspector condemning buildings, et cetera. And we can look at that in more detail and seeing what other communities have done to make sure that it is kind of a swift decision, particularly at emergencies or where there is truly a hardship involved at some point. But it is just a period. The demolition can go forward in kind of all of these cases, except in a local historic district, I believe, which is just a few buildings in our city, and certainly can go ahead. But it's a period where the commission and I guess all of the citizens of the community or Fitchburg would have an opportunity to brainstorm solutions to alternatives to a demolition. And it would be our commission's kind of lead on this to help see what other options there could be, kind of looking backwards at the old Wallace Library, the original Wallace Library. If there were a delay period, how would that discussion be happening if we were there then, I guess, and there was such a demolition delay ordinance. So there's a great discussion, and kind of looking at value of what is important to our community, what things are important to our community for economics, for our preserving our heritage, et cetera. So this is all great discussion. And I'm sure we will continue this more. Any other comment before we, I believe we will table it, we'll continue it obviously till next meeting's discussion. Any other comments on the demolition delay? Hearing none, let's move on to the Item number 6, update on the proposed wall preservation ordinance study.
Yeah, I would like to receive comments from commission members about the present draft, which I sent out to everyone. And the big change was to change the amount of the fine to be determined, because the city council is what we want to submit this to the city council for its consideration. And I think it's right that the city council decide the amount of the fine. With the amount that we had in there was according to another ordinance, Fitchburg City Ordinance, dealing with stone walls facing scenic roads. I had just put the same amount of the fine. But if the city council wants to have a different fine or no fine at all, that's up to the city council to determine. I also sent out a little quiz, but had problems with the attachment. I don't know how many people got, but the main point was the first image. I hope people got that. And that, there were 5 images altogether. The first one is of a stone wall that has a good probability of being a historic stone wall. It's constructed like a historic stone wall. That's further research would have to be done to determine, in fact, if it fits that criterion. And the other 4 images were of stone walls that are pretty clear they're not historic stone walls, although very nice stone walls. They're not of particular historic significance. And then the second question was, which one of these would it be easiest to pilfer stones from? And the answer is the first one, because it's drywall, the stones are loose, they're piled on top of one another, and someone can just come along and say, oh, I like that stone, I think I'll take it. That's how we lose historic heritage, is, you know, by dribs and drabs. And I just wanted an ordinance to provide a guideline for people who are concerned about history. If you have a historic stone wall on your property, what do you do with it? Can you just take stones out of it and use it for something else? Well, yeah, it's your property, but you might not want to after you find out what the historic value of that stone wall is to keep it intact. What about repairing a historic stone wall? Well, then there should be guidelines for that. And the city officials who are directing these things should be aware of them as well. So yeah, we're going to lose historic stone walls, no doubt about it. But let's try to keep as many of them as we can, because that's part of the identity of Fitchburg and of New England. Let's try to keep that identity as long as we can, because if we lose that identity, then we become urban sprawl. We become, you know, not to put down Los Angeles, but Los Angeles is not my ideal city. I believe it or not, I like Fitchburg. I like the historic buildings. The downtown has some beautiful buildings. I'd like to keep them. And when I go walking and I see stone walls, I think this is part of the heritage historical heritage of Fitchburg. So that's the motivating factor behind this ordinance.
I think you have two good documents there, Don. I did put these together and was writing an article to post in the Historical Society newsletter.
Great.
Kind of got in, it's not making this next newsletter, it's kind of rushed up to the deadline, and then and I was talking with Keith and Susan about it, and we're deciding to put it on hold to the next newsletter, so
Okay,
we can probably work with you, and then,
that's great. That's great to hear.
you know, so that's gonna hopefully get the word out about the stone walls in town,
Mhm.
because a lot of people are looking at the newsletter.
Well, you know, the stone walls, it's interesting. It's an interesting. If you're not keyed into it, if you're not alerted to it, they're invisible.
Right.
You don't see them.
Yeah.
But once, you know, I heard a lecture at the Wallace Library by
Did you see Thorson there?
Thorson.
Yeah. That's
It
great.
Yeah, it was a Zoom meeting. And I said, you know, he's right. And then when I go out driving or walking, I see these stone walls that I never saw before.
That's happening to me now after I've gone through your documents and
Yeah,
just driving around town, I'm just, they're catching my eye,
right,
you know,
right.
yeah, it's amazing. So that's what we need to get the word out, so other people in town get that same feeling and will notice the walls too.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Andy, thank you for starting to put together an article for the Historical Society newsletter. I think this is a good piece of this. And then Don, if you could work with Andy on this, I think, you know, as you're maybe with your photos and things too, that kind of give a little background and a little bit of you know, how do we communicate this to, you know, in this case through a newsletter article and perhaps future types of things on getting us to be aware of our surroundings, and in this case stone walls that are certainly part of our heritage in Fitchburg from colonial times, perhaps even earlier if there are in any pre-European or indigenous stone type of structures, which may or may not be in Fitchburg, you know, all the way up to kind of even perhaps things from the quarry, et cetera, that we'd mentioned and may or may not be a part of this. So the educational part of this, I think, is really important, and certainly part of our charge, I guess, as commission members, being aware of our heritage and being able to preserve it. And I'm just putting out it if it is you know, not quite sure what an ordinance should be. If an ordinance is indeed a law of the city to be enforced, or can an ordinance be an intent, a suggestion, a imploring without having consequences in it. And having, certainly other communities have a Stonewall ordinances in Massachusetts, and, you know, kind of following, maybe doing some inquiries into those cities and towns that have ordinances of how they how they've managed it, how they would do it differently, or maybe some research into that we as
Yeah, I've been doing some research, and I have copies of their Stonewall ordinances. And what strikes me is how behind the rest of Massachusetts, Fitchburg is a historic city. But in things like demolition delay and stone wall ordinance, it's way behind other cities that are also historic cities. And I would just like to see Fitchburg brought up to speed on that.
Well, your efforts are going to make that happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen.
Yeah, and thanks, Andy, also for helping to, kind of get a conversation started and word out. Perhaps, I think the newsletter deadline is for, what is it, December? The
Yeah, that'll
historic,
be the next deadline, say mid-December.
yeah. Yeah, if Andy, maybe if you could share some of the information, and maybe the two of you could maybe create this article with and maybe it is a maybe it's a question also for comment from the readers of asking them to contact the commission or one of you, and as some thoughts on it and ways of describing the importance to members of the city, and maybe asking if it should be saying that other communities do have ordinances like this, and looking for comment and backing for creating an ordinance like this. It could be certainly enforced at some time. Any other comments on number 6, Stonewall Preservation Ordinance Study? Great. Well, good work to you all, and let's continue on and see if we can get some, obviously some action happening on this in the near future. So I think piece in the newsletter, it will be great. Other educational opportunities, maybe after the newsletter, we could maybe have a kind of a public forum for discussion. I'm not quite sure how to get some more feedback on this newspaper article. I'm not sure too many people are reading the newspapers these days, but I might be wrong. And maybe a public forum for comment, and getting the pros and cons from people out there that might want to give some comment on it.
Well, I think, Keith, that it's pretty, I can't think of a way we could organize a community forum, but perhaps we could talk with Susan at the Historical Society and have this be part of one of their meetings, or this be the focus of one of their upcoming meetings. Both the stone wall and preservation, and also the demolition delay. I would think that the members of the Historical Society could, offer some ideas or suggestions, whatever, about how to, how they would see providing more information to the community.
Perhaps at one of their board meetings, or
Yes.
as a program.
I think it's a program. And
Okay.
I'd be glad to work with Dawn and Andy on that.
So maybe after the article is published and something in the spring.
Yes.
Okay. That sounds good. Maybe it's something that the article could, if Susan is willing to, and people are willing to kind of put together a kind of a program, a presentation that could be, if it's part of one of the educational programs that the society puts on, that we could help lead and perhaps use some of the resources of, I think Andy found some good photographs of some historic stone walls that are unique to Fitchburg. And maybe kind of build on that in the presentation and have that as a public forum through the Historical Society program. So yeah, that could be great. And whether have them both together, stone wall and demolition delay, or have it as two separate programs, maybe no, interesting to find out. And perhaps using the society as a possible venue for that. Might want to look at that as a city agency or city commission. Or does it become a public meeting per se, and does it come under public meeting venue? Or are we doing this as members of the Historical Society, but referencing the Historical Commission? Interesting. I just thought of that, so I just want to make sure that we are in doing a proper. I think the educational part of it is good, and we could be presenting at that forum also, because it is a kind of a city policy that we're talking about in both of these possible ordinances that are part of the city. Any thoughts on that? I'm just need to look into that a little bit further. I can spend some time trying to figure that out. So just mentioning it in passing so that we are communicating in officially or in our private thoughts on it, but referring back to ordinances and things or potential ordinances.
I think we're getting a good start on it by getting an article out, some information in the society newsletter. And then if that led to.
Yes, absolutely. That,
Yeah.
yes.
That's an important first step.
Sure.
Thank you, Andy
Yeah, and
Don.
yeah, and this all started with Susan sitting in on one of our meetings early this year, I believe.
Yes.
When we discussed this, and she had offered an opportunity for perhaps having it in the newsletter or some other forum like that. So that's great. Thank you to all of you. Okay, okay to move on to item 7.
Yes, and I will tell you that I have finally spoken to a Simon's family member, and she assured me that she would take that up with someone else in the family who would perhaps be the lead if it happens. She did say to me that I had invited her to the groundbreaking for Simon's Hall, and if you all remember, when Simon's Hall was first brought about, it was a private project. It's now, the building is now used by Fitchburg State. But I did a lot of research on the Simons family to coincide with preparing the historic designation for that building. And I did say to the woman I was talking to that I'd be happy to loan them, not loan them, but give them lots of information, that could be used. So I just have to wait to hear from her.
Okay, well,
And if-
keep us posted.
I will, I will.
Thank you for moving that on, so that's great. All right, update on historic districts information brochure, map information guide, signage, web posting, and Fitchburg State University faculty-led project coordinating ongoing for the fall, spring semester of 21-22 and 22-23. The update on the past two semesters, back semesters work. The brochure is, I believe, 90% complete. The graphics student still has a few items to finish up on that. I have not contacted the faculty sponsor on this, Andy, or excuse me, JJ, on what progress he had. I'd meant to, and I just haven't followed up with him on that yet. We should have that in final draft form in the near future once we have the graphics corrections made on that. The second semester was creating some of the Clio websites with students in the spring semester, and I believe there were, I'm guessing, 8 or 9 Clio sites that students researched and posted in Fitchburg. Some of them with pieces on historic districts and others as individual building sites. One of them was the past location of the Trinitarian Church, which was now part of the Monument Park area, and a good backstory on most of that work and the buildings that followed in its wake. It's good research on the anti-slave movement that created the offshoot that created the Trinitarian Church, etc. So that's a good piece that is in the digital Clio site, one of the more recent ones that were put in. This fall semester, JJ Sylvia, the faculty member, is also working with his class to do similar types of things. Ellen and I were sat in on one of his most, the class was it last week, the week before, where students were kind of looking to come up with topics for a similar digital recording of the heritage of some heritage of Fitchburg. The final determinations to be kind of determined yet where they are going. Some of the discussion, and maybe some of you can kind of help with this, is that they were interested in, several of the students were interested in facilities for the treatment of mental health, and in the heritage of Fitchburg, how mental health was handled, and were there any kind of vestiges or heritage of this that certainly looking back on history. I know one of the students came from Taunton, I believe it is, that had a major buildings or major campus of treatment of mentally ill persons that were quite popular at the turn of the century, the last century, the previous centuries, 1800s into the 1900s, and through at least the middle part of the 20th century, these institutions were quite active. Toward the end of the 20th century and now into this century, these facilities have become certainly less used as and more outpatient type of work, and assimilation in other hospital settings rather than institutionalized types of treatment of mental health. So does Fitchburg have any history of facilities of
No,
mental
but
health?
Gardner had a state facility for mental health, and that was considered to be a regional facility. There were several area mental health hospitals, and I'm trying to remember when this happened, but all of a sudden there was an announcement that they were going to close all of them. And it caused serious problems with family members who then had to try to find some alternative place for their parents. And I remember one friend had, it was just the most traumatic experience. And finally, she was able to find a rest home that would take her mother, but people got very little assistance in finding other places for, former patients to be housed in Fitchburg. And I can tell you this as a certainty, we had a number of people who became streetwalkers in downtown. And I had a daughter who worked in the coffee shop, and she one day said to me, "Gee, Mommy, I don't know who these people are, but it's so sad. They don't, they don't really even know how to order a cup of coffee." And I explained to her that those people had, may well have been patients at the Gardner State Hospital and didn't have family members who could help them find someplace else to live. It was very sad.
Yeah, I recall that also. I believe Worcester had a large facility, Taunton had a large facility, and like you say, Gardner did also.
They had a huge campus in Gardner.
Well, where was it located in Gardner? Do you recall?
Let's see. If you were to drive up 140, and I can't think of the street that you'd take on the left. There's a street light. You can go to Ashburnham or into Gardner. It's off of that street somewhere. I'll have to think about where the street was.
Maybe up near the Gardner City Hospital somewhere.
Hey, pardon?
Up near the Gardner City Hospital?
No, it was in another area.
Okay. Right.
I'm sorry that at the moment I can't think of the name of the street, but I'll let you know.
All right. Well, thank you. So hopefully we will have an update on the brochure and what's happening in today's class of additional sites that the students will be primarily doing digital website connections, and probably through the Clio website. Also, the university's library is in the process of creating a digital history sharing type of facility, or particularly for sharing historic information, making it more publicly accessible. And they're working on some process with the help of Dr. Sylvia, and perhaps some input with us and some coordination with the Historical Society and the Fitchburg Public Library also, that has, and public libraries in general are looking at ways to make their public, particularly heritage and historical information, accessible through computer connections and things also, besides just in hard copy and that's at these sites also. So a brand new world for archiving, let's say, and we're trying to stay up to pace with it also. Number 9, Wallace Building entry stones reuse. Megan had mentioned that currently a large quantity of these brownstone entry of the Wallace Building that happened to be just to the east of the Faith United Church. It was demolished in the 1970s. Ellen was involved with helping to at least save some of these, the 2-story entrance, brownstone entrance. That portion of the facade
Mhm.
was disassembled, and a lot of these stones were saved. And there are probably, I'm guessing there are probably 50 or 60 of these stones in the current redevelopment authority building, or the old GE plant, that need to find a new home. And as this facility might be, this portion of the old building might be rented out in the near future. One mention was that I think at the last meeting was that some of these stones could be perhaps used along the rail trail, the Twin Cities Rail Trail. And that was kind of one comment that came from a previous meeting. We've kind of kept this as an active item on the agenda. And the removal of these stones is probably coming soon. So it is I think we need to try to find some action on this. Any of you interested in seeing these? And I think I sent a document out several
Yes.
months ago to members. And did you get a copy of that also?
Yes. I have
The
that.
student study. So that gives a little bit of, I could think a couple of photographs of kind of what these stones look like. Similar material to the brownstone that's the Fay Club is looking to do some cleaning and preservation on, also same type of material. So I'm any suggestions on how we should organize this, and perhaps we could approach this as they've been temporarily stored kind of about the city, and mainly at this, or about half of them been at this location for a long time.
Those, excuse me, Keith, those are most of the stones. There are a few that are still left. Originally, I was able to work with the West family and have them stored at their farm. And then, several years later, the West family was selling their property, and people didn't want the stones on their property. And that's when I went to the redevelopment authority and asked them if they would allow the stones to be moved. So I was able to get them moved to as many as possible, moved to the exterior of the old GE property. And then later on, the man who was in charge of the building had them moved inside because they got money to pave their parking lot. But they're Don, I'm thinking of you because I really needed a friend to talk with the Fitchburg Sentinel about tearing down that building. But eventually, the principals at actually it was the publisher, took me to lunch, and he did agree to, he told me I could have anything I wanted from the building. And I said, no, no, you don't. I'm sorry, you don't understand. I'm not trying to save anything for myself. I just think that we should have something for the city. And so he agreed, and he did have the contractor who was demolishing the building, carefully took the stones down and brought them to the West's farm. So they've been on a journey, and I would, personally love to think that there would be something that they could be used for, and noted that they were once the entrance to the Fitchburg Sentinel.
I had a thought where the public library is undergoing a renovation, but was it mentioned they have like this memorial garden space? And I don't know if some of those entryway stones could go there.
Well, that's a good idea.
It's an idea,
Yes.
especially if you had the stones that might have had the R and the W on them for Rodney Wallace.
Oh, there is a wonderful one. If you'd like, I'll call you and we can have a date and go down and look at them if you'd like.
Is it Megan that could show us access to where those are or something? Or?
Oh, sure. I do. I don't need to be. Megan
You
will be
could
glad
too?
to.
Okay. Yeah, I think that'd be neat to go see those.
Yep, the same Rodney Wallace.
Right. Yeah. So,
That would be a very appropriate.
if we had those R and W stones and they could go to the public library space, that'd be pretty neat. Yeah.
Thank you for thinking of that.
Mhm.
Yeah, and any other thoughts? Public spaces, any thoughts about perhaps the rail trail?
Well, as I forget who thought of that, but I did think that would be another opportunity. I think some time ago, we talked about the sign that would be on the Fitchburg end of the trail, depending on where you were starting and ending. Maybe they could even be used there in some way, or some of them.
Mhm. In the new business, I had just sent out this afternoon a copy of a letter that we'll be talking about, which is in reference to the rail trail, kind of the final design piece on this. So the thought is that we might mention that in our new business.
That would be good, and we could add the stones to it.
Yep. We want them in a spot that, that they would be appreciated. There are some sitting areas and things along the rail trail. I suppose we could sprinkle here and there, and perhaps at the end location in the city area.
What about a more urban setting? I'm thinking, there's a small park to the right of City Hall. with,
Yes,
Rolling Stone Road,
Renaissance Park, yes.
whatever, yeah. Yes, that's what it's called. And then the stones would be just across the street from where they originated.
Well, that's a good thought.
They'd be downtown, which is where they came from.
Right. I don't know.
It's a possibility.
I will make a note, Sam. I'll call Rollstone Bank and see if they still own it. I know I'm pretty sure they take care of it. They
Oh, they
created
do.
that.
I thought it was the city's.
No, I don't. They may have turned it over to the city, but I'll get back to you,
Okay.
but I'll find out.
And the new empty Sentinel building has kind of a parking lot out front. I don't And it's questionable what the future of that building or that site is going to hold. It would be nice if they went back to that spot, but I don't think we have certainly any control of that. It's not public property, and probably the current owner of the old Sentinel building, newspaper building, is
Jimmy Pappas owns it.
yes, and we already kind of talked with him, and I don't think he's too interested in using those. But and if he, they're just kind of they'd be just kind of sticking out along the edge of the parking lot or something, and I'm not sure they'd be taken care of properly. Okay, be thinking on this, and we'll mention it again in the new business. Moving on to item 10, the historic markers. This is, we're trying to get, we haven't had any new orders for markers for about a year's time now, or just about a year's time. Thankfully, as we don't have our historic marker person with us anymore, markers that were paid for and not produced, and the money deposited. I have followed up in the past month with a letter to the heirs of Robert Leonard, seeing if, and again, listing in details, the money was standing. I haven't heard any reply on this yet, and I think, Don, you were one of the recipients. Now, I'm not sure if you've received your money back.
No, I haven't received anything.
Okay.
I think at one point we mentioned, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ellen.
Well, I don't know if we mentioned it at a meeting or just in another conversation, but I wondered about having a meeting with someone at Monty Tech and to find out if the students would be, or if somebody would be interested in taking the project on, and the students would make them.
Yeah, at one of the meetings you weren't able to get to, I had talked with Monty Tech and approached them on this. They making hand painted signs was kind of out of the they wouldn't be able to control that as well. And they are providing some engraved type of signs. They are computer generated engraved types of signs on plastic material that they have provided to some other communities for not specifically markers like this, but some other designations of sites in some of our surrounding cities. But it was after discussion with a couple of faculty people that were directly involved in it, it seemed like it was not, it would be changing our markers by a lot and not quite of the hand painted type that we were looking for. And so I think we would kind of shy away from that, because it would be much different than the type of signs we have now. So they did, and we did have a good long discussion with them on it. And I would, it kind of turned out that they wouldn't be able to kind of come up with the same type of quality of signs that more skilled sign makers could do, I guess you'd say. So kind of from there, I have quotes from 3 sign companies. One from handpaintedwoodsigns.com, which is kind of technically is taken over Old Colony Artisans or Robert Leonard's business. Although his They are a New Jersey company, and they gave a quote of something very similar to what we were getting from the previous sign maker. The price would be $170 plus a delivery charge of $12 to $15. These are hand painted. They're on wood, equal or they claim better quality than Mr. Leonard's signs. That's in New Jersey. That was option A. Option B was our local sign company, Was Arthur Signs in Fitchburg. Got a quote from them for the same oval signs, the same colors. These would be mask painted rather than hand painted. So they would probably do a computer generated, let me call it like a stencil or a mask or like a screen print, if you will, where they would be able to print on a wood sign, same colors, same kind of quality, if you will, except it's not hand painted. It would be computer generated lettering, not the individual hand strokes that you would find in a hand painted sign. That was option B. And that cost would be $157.25 per sign. After we approved the order and they were created, the local residents could go pick up the signs. There would be no delivery charge. They would just pick them up on, I think it's Airport Road, where Was Arthur Signs is. And the last quote I was able to receive through a recommendation through the Council, the Arts Council Alliance, I might be mispronouncing the name, was for Cinda Warren Joyce, who is an artisan in Ashburnham. She would do hand-painted signs, very similar to what we had been getting in the past, kind of a little bit more local in an adjoining town of Ashburnham. And her price was $250 per sign, and delivery, I don't have details on if they would be delivered or picked up at her studio or whatever. So
What was the
the
current
first
price?
one, New Jersey firm. Pardon me?
What was the original cost for the signs?
I think it was $62 plus
Yeah,
or
I
minus
know,
a
I know.
dollar.
I knew it was under 100.
Yes.
Excuse me.
I think that was more than a deal at the time for something
Absolutely.
created. And it's something, he's been doing this for a lot of communities for a long, long time, and I think he never raised his prices, but I'm not sure. No one has been able to kind of match that price. The closest one is Was Arthur at $157, then $170 for the New Jersey hand-painted signs, and the highest price is the $250 from the Ashburn artisan. So 2 hand-painted signs for $170 and $250. These are all on the same wood background, and one computer-generated mask-painted sign from Was Arthur at $157.25. So if any direction, anybody want to go with the
Where was the
I'd like
original
to-
maker from? I'm sorry, where was the original sign maker from? Where was his office?
he was I think he was originally in New Hampshire or Maine, and then he moved to Providence after his wife passed away. And so not local at the time. We'd gotten the name from several other historical societies or commissions in the local area that were using Bob Leonard to do these hand-painted signs. So he had a kind of reputation in some local historical groups around us. That's how we found him originally.
Keith, why don't we just offer the menu with 3 choices?
That's possible.
And we don't have to decide.
It becomes a little bit more paperwork from our side on this, I suppose. Um,
Where were the applications going through? Is it going through Historical Society or to get these signs done? Or commission?
Good, yeah, good question, Andy. The process was, we have an application form that you can see on the Fitchburg Historical Commission's website. That's still for the old $62 price that we'll have to, no one has put any in, thankfully. I should have that, pull that off of there, but I was kind of waiting to get this approved. They would send the application, it would come to us with this, with the check made out to the sign painter themselves. So we didn't have to actually hold the money. But we would approve, we would get their information and what they thought the historic information was on their house or building. We would then, Charles and I would go to the Historical Society to try to verify the date or who it was that was, maybe the house was, or building might be called or named after, or who the historic person of interest was that occupied that site. And verifying the date and the information, come up with a draft of what the kind of minimal wording of the plaque would be. In most cases, it would be home of Marshall Tuckerman or something like that, circa 1842. And then at the base of it would say the Fitchburg Historical Commission in small letters at the bottom of the oval. So there was usually three or four lines of lettering, and very kind of concise, but we would verify the information before it was sent on to the sign painter. So we would mail kind of the final wording, usually verifying it with the person that made the application, saying, this is what we're going to do with it. Are you okay with that? And then we would send that information on by mail, along with the check that was made out to the sign painter. And then they would then, in the $62, delivery was included, and he would mail the finished sign with 2 screws to mount on the wall. So the delivery price was included in that also. So we didn't have to do any more beyond that. It was up to the local requester then to mount their own signs. We would recommend that they have it on the front of the house, but it was kind of up to them where they put it. So it was a little bit of work on our side, and we did try to verify the information to the Historical Society or any information we might have had. And I've got kind of a file of records of the past. And I think we've had somewhere between about 35 to 40 markers have been made in Fitchburg so far. We haven't had any requests in the last 8 months or so.
Okay.
So I think I think it would be best if we went with one of them, just to kind of make our life a little bit easier. So there's a little bit more control. You know, if somebody goes off, sends the wrong color out or something, we're only dealing with, that one particular.
Well, I think perhaps the New Jersey selection is the best of the 3.
Okay.
I think I had put in an email vote for the New Jersey firm also.
Okay.
I certainly would go along with that. Excuse me.
Don, any thoughts?
No, my initial inclination is the Fitchburg firm. It's the cheapest and it's in Fitchburg. But there's also a question of quality. And so the balancing the cost with the quality, I think it is a consideration.
Okay. Any other discussion? I think we have. I'm not going to vote. I'm kind of, well, I could vote. I don't know. I think I would stick with the local Fitchburg also, but that's 2 to 3 for hand painted sign, 3 for the New Jersey company. I think they get the majority votes. And I think we would, let me contact them to see how we can kind of work out payment, coming through us and going to them ultimately. Maybe they have a PayPal type of thing or something that once we have an approved thing, we can have the money sent to them so they could create the sign. So it would be coming through at about $185 delivered probably to the owners. So because they have a delivery charge of $12 to $15. So. And we will continue on our marker piece. I think people that are going for it, I think they would go for that amount, or somewhere in the upper $150 to $200 range for hand painted sign is okay in today's dollars. So.
Well, what I would like to suggest that we table it, and then you can, at our next meeting, you can fill us in on what you find out, Keith. You want to do that?
Okay, on the payment process, that was a little bit up in the air on the New Jersey firm. So, okay, that all right with everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
So I will check with the New Jersey company on payment.
And if they could, excuse me, if they could send something that of a sign that they've done for some other person or family house, so that we
Yes,
can see an example of their work.
Yes, they had sent some stuff in that. Let me resend out their original piece and you'll be able to see that.
Okay,
Might have been while your computer wasn't, you weren't getting email there for a while, so.
that's true. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Side by side of his work and Bob Leonard's work, almost kind of a side by side comparison of 2 signs that have been out in the weather for about 10 years each, and kind of
Okay,
the minimal deterioration on the 2, I guess, is comparing it, saying that his was a little bit better. So we can, but they were both hand painted, and we can stay with the hand painted, which is nice feature to it.
thank you.
So good discussion. Thank you. And I think we've made some progress on that. I appreciate that. New business is, and sorry for I received it yesterday and I sent it out in an email just before the meeting to all the members, is a request from Stantec, which is a consulting company for the Twin Cities Rail Trail. And they're asking many of the agencies in Fitchburg, the mayor, all the city council members, planning board and DPW, et cetera, comments on what is called the, let me make sure I read this correct. It is for, not to turn a page back. Hang on a second. It is a Twin Cities Rail Trail Phase 2 final design. And we need to send, if we have any comments on the final design, we have to get them back to them by October 10th, which is coming up very quickly here. So about 2 weeks from now, they're looking for comment. The Phase 2 is the tail end in both Fitchburg and Leominster, as I read the document map. In Fitchburg, the tail end of the rail trail that's not complete yet goes from, I believe its current ending, which is at 4th Street in the Patch area just off of Water Street.
Mhm.
So the final piece is that actually goes currently scheduled to go through one of the back alleys between
Railroad Street.
maybe near Railroad. It's up half a block up from Railroad Street. It kind of goes through to behind the old St. Bernard, not St. Bernard Church, but yes,
The-
is that correct?
The nuns' house,
Yes,
where the nuns used to live. Mm.
yes. And then it would go down to where roughly where the old underground passages that went under the railroad tracks to Sawyer Passway. But from there, at that point, there's going to be a small resting point and the beginning of being able to go over the railroad tracks, over the Nashua River, and get down on the train station side of the railroad tracks and the river. There's going to be a ramp and a large bridge and a descending ramp coming down to just to the east side of the train station and the Mart building, if you will, that's on Main Street at the head of the train station. And the last detail, it showed it is going to end at Hayden Passway, which is the little diagonal road that goes down to Sawyer Passway, just to the east of the Mart building that's on Main Street.
Right.
It's kind of it's basically the end of a downward ramp that's at a very low slope. So it's can be done with walkers and bicycles, and maybe wheelchairs also. I'm not sure of the slope. Coming down, and it will be the terminus of the Fitchburg end of the Twin City Rail Trail. So, and we've talked in past years where we became aware of this, and we ended up finding out that the final design of this end of it was on hold. We had in the past talked about creating some signage, if you will, or other recognition of things that are happening, such as history of the patch, history of the railroad bridge that crosses over the Nashua River was one of the early stone arched bridges, and is a historic engineering artifact, if you will, that's now turned into a much wider stone bridge, but it's still a stone bridge. The original is kind of part of it and has become a larger, deeper span because there's more and more rail tracks that go over it. And we were contacted about this as a historical commission because it does show up in the engineering historic heritage inventory. So maybe mention of that, certainly mention of the Nashua River's importance to downtown Fitchburg and kind of all of Fitchburg. And the terminus is actually an entrance into Main Street downtown, and certainly the heritage of downtown. And it's also on the western edge. The terminus is the western corner, if you will, of the Warren Square National Historic District that included the current Simon's Hall, the Fitchburg Plumbing Building, the Moran Square Diner, et cetera, Sawyer, Stovostros, Sawyer's.
Sylvanus Sawyer.
Okay. Oh, thank you. And many of the other manufacturing pieces, including the old Tarbuck's furniture that's being renovated into housing, the fire station at the corner of Summer and Main Street. All of that kind of heritage there. So there could be mention of that, and certainly all of the historic districts, or 6 districts that we have running up Main Street. And that's kind of the eastern end of Main Street and also a lot of our heritage. So certainly should be a welcome to Fitchburg, or for Fitchburg residents starting at that end, kind of a mention of what the heritage of the city. And I think is an opportunity for the commission to be proactive to try to have something more important than just a ramp that dumps out onto the street, or a handicap ramp going out into a crosswalk.
It's
We
an
had this-
opportunity.
Yeah, it's an opportunity. I'd personally suggested that there is a vacant piece of land just at the western end of the Fitchburg Plumbing Building
Uh-huh.
that was owned by the city as park land that was never kept up as any type of park land. It's between the Mart Building and Fitchburg Plumbing, which is a grand historic building, even though it has a Swiss chalet gable end to it right now. It is similar to Quincy Marketplace caliber of buildings that we have in downtown Boston historic areas. And this is certainly is eligible for tax credit funding, and will probably, I would hope at some point, be restored and used in a repurposed at some point in time. Even maybe Fitchburg Plumbing doing it for their own plumbing business too, but there's certainly tax credits ready for that. Fitchburg Plumbing now, or the people that own the Fitchburg Plumbing building, own this little quarter-acre site of ex-Park Place area, and it would behoove the city, in my opinion, to repurchase this and make it part of an entrance to the city, or the terminus, the Fitchburg terminus of the rail trail.
Well, should we try to have, a little meeting with the express purpose of discussing this? I agree with everything you've said, Keith, and it's really an opportunity to put out information or present information regarding that area, which is just steeped in history. And you may recall that one time, after I finished doing a lot of the research for the Moran Square Historic District, I wanted to put strobe lights on the top of all those buildings and have the lights go on every night and have people ask what it was all about, because the inventions are phenomenal that took place there. Anyway, enough of my old mind. So what do you think?
Yes, just a reminder for everybody, the Moran Square Historic District, anybody wants to read the full record of the National Register filing on it, and it's must be, I don't know, 50 to 70 pages of documents and maps and so forth.
It is.
In the nomination papers and on record National Register. I ask you to go to Macris list or Macris maps, if you will, and find that document and just take a look at the background that Ellen, if you're interested in finding the information about the background that Ellen's talking about and all the research that's she had helped with, and other historians had added on to make this National Register nomination for that whole area. And it's amazing, and there's amazing documentation on it also in these documents. So, and making reference with the signage and maybe as making it with a QR code that you could go right into these particular documents for anybody of interest, or something similar to that, or riding my bicycle there and say, this is the, the Moran Square Historic District, what's that all about? And zooming in on it with your phone to take down the QR code, then you have the whole file of information that you can read then or read at your leisure, because it's quite well documented. And similar to other sites for the other 5 historic districts, or soon to be historic districts, that go on up Main Street, and all the individual buildings and occurrences and things that kind of reflect the heritage. So, so 2 weeks to kind of come up with a comment letter. I'd be happy to start drafting it. But with your blessing, and I could circulate a beginning draft to everybody and ask for your additions and comments.
Good.
I think it's an important piece. And I think we would want to try to, as you look at the email I sent you, I think there are probably 20 people in the city or agencies that it's been sent to. Supposedly, we received a certified letter the city clerk had sent. And Don or Andy, as you're at the meeting room there, I'm wondering if, what time is it? I think city clerk's office is closing, but if one of you could actually get a copy of pick up the certified letter before it closes at 5 o'clock, maybe if somebody could run over there right now, that would be great. See if you could pick it up. I think it's addressed to me, but as a commission member, if you could pick it up. And I don't see.
That's city clerk.
Okay, thanks. So, any other new business? We have had plenty. Thank you for all of your input on pieces. I will I'll work with Ellen to get these minutes completed, and now to you, hopefully in the short near future, we'll be able to take a look at them at the October meeting, scheduled for October 27th. And
Don's talking to somebody at the city clerk office.
okay, good.
See if your letter's there.
All right.
That would be good.
I think we're making a little progress on things, and we had a lot of work this month getting our records up to date, and I appreciate everybody's effort in that.
Just on the rail trail, has that had an opening yet? Like an official opening yet? Or it's still waiting?
No, I don't think so.
Not yet.
Certain portions of it are certainly open to the public for use right now.
Yeah.
4th Street going toward Leominster.
Andy, if you drive, on Water Street and take your left on 1st Street, and I think you go down to Railroad, you can, and if you keep following that, I'm not exactly sure. Some of it might be on Middle Street, and there's also a lane. You'll see some of it down there.
Okay.
on the Fitchburg end.
So I just checked the city clerk's office. They actually close at 4:30. But there was someone who did respond, who answered and said she didn't see any certified letters, so we'll have to check back.
Okay. Yeah, she'd sent an email saying that one was addressed to me, I guess, the Historical Commission, but I think we're certainly welcome to comment whether we're on the address list or not. So we're part of a city agency. And when you take a look at your email, I had forwarded a copy to everybody just a couple hours ago. There's a lengthy list, and hopefully we somehow copy all these people in the on our comments. And maybe I'll make an effort to I'll try to speak with the mayor, and maybe also speak with Tom Swarowski as the community development planning office that has a lot of connection with this project also, I would think. So, and I send information about this vacant property as before to Tom and others, and kind of shared it. And this was probably over a year ago when we were talking about the rail trail information then. So it, being able to find funds to perhaps enlarge the end of the terminus to include, some open space. I believe that the Leominster end has some kind of better terminus type of area, starting at their old train station and going to, I believe, Mechanic Street, with some at least sit down areas and things like that, and bike rack areas and things that take you to the southern end of it in Leominster. So I would hope that ours is not kind of a downrated terminus, and that this kind of public access way is an opportunity to kind of celebrate the importance of the connection of obviously these two cities, the transportation connection, and certainly highlighting the heritage, which kind of our responsibility as a historical commission. So I will draft that and try to get it out in the next week so we have some time to comment on it. And I'll try to make some phone calls also to see what other things you might get some backing, maybe from the mayor's office and from Tom's group.
Well, thank you.
Thanks,
And
Keith.
any thoughts on where the city would get funding for this? Because this is always the question.
Well-
Does this become part of Parks Department? Would it become, and who buys it, and where would the funding come from?
Well,
And
it
maybe
would-
the state would have funding, I don't know.
Well, the Parks Department would probably be the place that it would be sent to. I can tell you that within, I don't know how many years ago, the Rotary Club wanted to develop a park there. And I don't know whatever happened to that. I just made a note to call somebody. I don't know what happened there. But I know they were going to, that was going to be one of their projects.
When the city owned it,
No, yes, maybe the city owned it. Or I think it coincided with the time that, what's their name? The family, the plumbing family, Hayes, when the Hayes bought it.
Oh, okay. All
Well,
right,
I'll let you know.
any other new business? Motion to adjourn.
All in
Make a
favor?
motion to adjourn.
Aye.
Okay, second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion approved. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good evening, and we'll be in touch.